Okay, so hi everybody. My name is Jess Gonzalez, and today I'll be presenting opportunities in the cannabis industry and brand protection. So, just to get some legal disclaimers out of the way, the information provided today is not constitute legal advice, but is purely for educational purposes. So, just a little bit about me, who I am, why I'm qualified to be before you today presenting on this specific issue. I'm cannabis and intellectual property attorney at Hiller PC, which, if anybody is not familiar with the firm, this is the firm that sued the DEA and petitioned the Supreme Court to deschedule cannabis on constitutional grounds. I also serve as outside general counsel for Minorities for Medical Marijuana, a national nonprofit with over 27 chapters in the United States. I used to sit on the policy committee of the Minority Cannabis Business Association. I currently serve as a social equity CLE chair of the International Cannabis Bar Association. I've presented at over 100 cannabis events on different topics, from intellectual property to startup challenges to social equity, social justice as well. So I'm very happy to be with you here today and be presenting this. And so I've done a lot of work in this space. I always say my paid part of my career is helping out applicants prepare for state cannabis licenses, helping out companies with brand protection around the United States, and helping out with general compliance, business issues, anything like that. The non paid of my career has been in advocacy. So I was part of NJCAN 2020, which was the coalition to help push forward legalization in New Jersey. And I was part of the Social Impact Committee. We were successful in getting various social equity provisions, both in the law and in the regulations as well. And I'm also responsible for getting certain social equity language in various municipal ordinances in New Jersey. So I've done a lot. I wear a lot of hats in this space. So I wanted to let you know a little bit about who I am. And then at the end, I'll let you know how you can contact me if you have any questions. For folks that like to know where we stand and what we're going to be doing today, I've prepared a small agenda. So we're going to go over some cannabis industry highlights. Then we're going to go over some plant touching opportunities. For those that don't really want to get involved in the plant touching side, we'll be talking about the ancillary business part of the business as well. I'll give you a little bit of insight into how to start a company, the basic things that you need to establish the foundation for your business, how to protect certain intellectual property that you may not even know that you have. Then we'll go into a little bit of, if you want to get into the plant touching side, what are you going to need to do to apply for a state cannabis license? And then at the end, I'll give you a little nuggets of wisdom that I've learned from my experience, both as an attorney, as an advocate, and helping clients out in this space. So I'm a lawyer. So, of course, the first thing that I'm going to start out with are the laws. And you should be aware that if you want to be in this industry, you should be aware of the parameters in which you have to work between. So as we can see here, we have certain US laws, but we also have various federal agencies that are supposed to carry out a lot of these laws. So if you haven't seen some of these laws, I'm not expecting you to go and read all of them, but you should be aware of what they stand for, what they say, the restrictions, et cetera, because we're in this unique industry where we have to navigate between the federal and the state dichotomy, which in any other industry is not an issue, but in the cannabis industry, it is a huge issue. So you should understand not only your state's laws, but also the federal laws as well that can probably govern a lot of your business decisions. So I wanted to first start off with, where are we in the United States in terms of opportunities, in terms of states that have legalized, states that are on the verge of legalization. So as you can see, we've been rolling back on prohibition. And so right now we have 18 states that have legalized for adult use, 37 states that have legalized for medical use, 32 states that have legalized or decriminalized cannabis, and 21 states that allow for home grow. Now, the reason I have an asterisk is because there are some states that are in flux. So the numbers could fluctuate between 1 and 2 states that are currently dealing with certain ballot issues. But as you can see, the United States is turning green, and now over 2 out of 3 Americans live in a state where cannabis is legal in some shape or form. Now, this is a very high level overview of what's going on in the cannabis industry, but it's important for you to know what the opportunities are and where this market is going. So in 2020, Americans purchased over $18.3 billion worth of cannabis products, which is a 71% increase from 2019. The legal cannabis industry also added over 74,000 jobs, counting for a 30% increase from the last year. Right now, 67% of Americans support cannabis legalization, legalization, but the even more shocking number is that 91% of Americans support cannabis in some shape or form. So this is no longer really becoming a bipartisan issue, really at all, because it seems that everybody's starting to at least get on board in some shape or form. How that is actually played out remains to be seen. But as you can see, cannabis is growing. It is a train that is moving. It is a train where we are not seeing any stops at all. So right now, it is creating a lot of jobs and is a #1 job creator in the world. And that is why you are here, to potentially get a job in the cannabis industry. So for those that actually want to go into the cannabis plant touching side of things, here's a slide that talks a little bit about the different opportunities that you can have. Now, every state is going to be different. There are certain states that allow certain types of licenses, other ones that don't, other ones that expand on other ones. But here, just broad overview. You have cultivation, processing, testing labs, wholesale, distribution, retail, delivery, consumption lounges, nurseries, or caregivers. Once again, this is going to be dependent on whatever state that you are in, because a lot of times there do tend to be restrictions. A lot of states are moving away from allowing vertical integration from the beginning to allow for smaller operators to have a chance at this game. So that is really going to be determined or wherever you live, but here are some of the opportunities that are available around the United States. Now, some of you probably say, I'm in marketing, I'm a lawyer, I'm an accountant, I'm an educator, I do consulting, and you may not actually want to get into the plant touching side of this, and that's perfectly okay. There are so many industries that have to support the plant touching industry, such that the ancillary part of the cannabis market is actually double the size of the plant touching market. Because if you think about it, for any cannabis business, you need legal, you need accountants, you're going to need compliance, you're going to need banking, you're going to need real estate brokers and architects and contractors and marketing and design and IT and all of that. So this is definitely not by any means an exhaustive list, but just an illustration of the types of opportunities that are out there. And the reason why I have the gold and the shovel there is because a lot of times the ancillary part of the cannabis industry is compared to the gold rush back in the day, when the folks that actually made the most money were the ones selling the shovels, not necessarily the ones who went digging for gold. So for those who are either feeling some sort of FOMO, you're feeling left behind, you're not involved just yet or as involved as you want to be, that's perfectly okay. There's still a lot of ways that you can get involved because this industry is still evolving. We are just barely scratching the surface of what this industry could actually be. So regardless of whether or not you want to go into the plant touching side or you want to go into the ancillary side of the cannabis industry, you are going to need a couple of these things if you want to start a company. So the first thing is your corporate entity formation. So a lot of times I get the question, do I need to apply? Do I need an LLC? Do I need a corporation? Should I set up a nonprofit? That's going to be a decision that you make with your attorney and a lot of times your accountant. But the reason why corporate entity protection is so important is because it protects you from any personal liability. So if you have been signing contracts, entering into business decisions with you individually as a person, you're taking on that liability personally, as in your cars, your bank account, your house, any of the assets that you have, you are leaving up for grabs on the chance that you get sued or something happens with your company. An LLC or a corporation protects your personal liability. It shields you from that. That way, it's really the company that would be taking that hit, not you individually. So it's important to make sure that you have that protection in place, or else, once again, you're just leaving up your personal assets up. So probably one of the best things I can tell you right now is if you are entering into any business contracts, anything like that, you almost always want to sign it under the purview of your company, not you individually. The next thing that you're going to need by starting a company is your corporate documents. So this is where the lawyers come in and to really assist. And I would really recommend that in the cannabis space that you obtain a lawyer who actually has knowledge of the cannabis industry, because there's a lot of nuances that are particular to cannabis that we don't see in any other industry. So if you're an LLC, You're going to need an operating agreement. If you want to go the corporation route, you're going to need a shareholders agreement and bylaws. Once again, that decision is going to depend on your end game with your company. If you're looking to get out of it in 5 to 10 years, it's going to depend on the types of investments that you'll be bringing in and what vehicle your investors might feel the most comfortable with. It'll depend on if you're selling goods or services. It'll depend on how many employees you plan to have, because both structures have different tax repercussions and incentives that, once again, you really want to be communicating with your accountant about which vehicle is the proper vehicle for you. Now, once you have set up your corporate entity, which you do with the state, once you have your corporate documents in place, which you will do with your attorney, the next thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to establish a bank account. Now, I know there's a lot of folks on here that probably say, but wait, I thought banks can't bank with cannabis companies. There are certain state chartered banks that are banking with cannabis companies. Now, what the maintenance fees are looking like on that really depends on the bank. So I would always encourage you to reach out to certain banks, ask them if they're taking on, cannabis related businesses. And if so, what are the rates? What does that look like? What does that look like, pre-license? And what does that look like post-license? You really want to understand what that looks like, because it could be very high fees because of the high level of compliance. The next thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to secure trademark protection for your brand name. Now, a lot of times what happens is clients will come to me after the fact, after they've put in money into branding assets, after they have already, made labels for some of their products, after they've already been selling apparel, but they've been doing it without any sort of protection or without even doing a search to make sure that that trademark is actually available for you. So I'll go into it in a little bit more, but this is something that you really should consider. And a question that I always get is, well, when should I file my trademark? Immediately. The moment that it is an idea, the moment that you have identified a mark that really represents the ethos of your company, one that you're comfortable with, one that really represents who you are and what your company stands for, the first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make sure that you go to an attorney and say, hey, I need to make sure that this name is available before I put it out there in the marketplace. Because the last thing that you want is, after spending so much time and money and energy into building up your brand, all of a sudden you get a cease and desist letter from a larger company saying, sorry, we used it first, you're infringing on our mark, please stop using it, and if not, we are going to pursue legal action. There are some times where these cease and desist letters will ask you for a certain percentage of profits of what you've made from using their mark. So it is extremely important that you seek trademark protection as soon as possible. The same goes with your domain name, the same goes for your social media name. Now, your domain name, your LLC name, your social media name, none of that equates to trademark use. So if you have all three of those and you think that you own the name, it's not entirely true. The only way to get trademark protection is you can do it on the state and federal level, but on the federal level is really where you want to be. That's going to be with the United States Patent and Trademark Office. I'll go into it a little bit more later. The other thing you want to do is you want to prepare your business plan, and you're going to want to make sure that you have a solid roadmap for how you want your business to play out. This is going to be important, not just to be, sort of a guiding North Star for you, but it's also going to help when you need to go out there to raise money for your company, right? If you're on sort of the ancillary part, it may not be, as imperative, but if you are going to go for a state cannabis license, you are going to want to make sure that you have a solid business plan that you'll be able to show prospective investors or prospective employees or prospective contractors. You need to make sure that you have that down and that it's done correctly and that it is done professionally as well. So we talked a little bit about your trademark, but I wanted to definitely highlight other areas of intellectual property that you may not be as familiar with. I know sometimes I get calls, people say I need a copyright when they really need a patent, or they say I need a patent when they really need a trademark. So it is also important to understand the difference between the various levels of protection that you can have. Trademarks are commercial in nature. It's for a symbol, symbol, name, design, anything that it could be, but it identifies and distinguishes goods and services. That's what it is. It is a consumer shortcut. It's why when you go into a sneaker store and you see the Nike swoosh, you automatically know that's a Nike sneaker, because they've built that brand for many, many years and invested a lot of time into building that goodwill. So remember that trademarks are for goods and services, and they are commercial in nature. Copyrights are different. Copyrights they apply to our original works of art that are fixed in a tangible medium, right? So that basically means you're looking at websites, you're looking at photography, you're looking at any, if you write educational materials, all of this can be copywritten with the Copyright Office. But the very cool thing about copyright is that the moment that it is established in a fixed form, meaning, let's say, for example, you're taking notes right now on what I'm doing, your notes are subject to copyright protection immediately because it is in a fixed, tangible form. But in order for you to enforce your rights with that copyright, you are going to need to get a copyright registration with the Federal Copyright Office. And it's generally not a expensive process. I believe it's around like $75, for an application. So if you have website that is proprietary, if you have a specific, design of how you want your packaging to look like, you're going to want to make sure that you obtain proper copyright protection for that. The other thing now is patents. Now, I'm not a patent attorney. I know what a patent is. I've worked with various patent licensing agreements, but I'm not a patent attorney. But that is for inventions, processes, chemical compositions, and yes, certain plant genetics. And a lot of folks always ask me, can I patent certain cannabis strains or anything like that? That you're going to have to go to a patent attorney really to ask. But they are, it's a patent, it's a limited duration property right. They only last, somewhere between 17 to 21 years. The other one that you may not be too familiar with is trade secrets. And the reason why you may not be too familiar with trade secrets is because there's no actual central office that actually holds trade secrets. So trade secrets could be anything. It could be comprised of just any information that gives you a competitive advantage over your competitors in your industry. The most popular trade secret by far is the Coca-Cola recipe. And the reason is back in the day, they were trying to figure out, do I want to patent this or do I actually want to keep it a trade secret? Now, remember, as I said, patents will last only 17 to 21 years. And then after that, it's open to the public domain. Trade secrets, on the other hand, are perpetual in nature, meaning they can exist forever as long as they remain secret. So if you're thinking about this in any sort of industry, let's say the cannabis industry, right? So your supplier list, your distributor list. If you're making a product, what is the chemical composition of your products? How much of each type of ingredient are you putting in? What type of formulas are you putting in? A lot of times that can be covered with trade secret law. Now, there is no place that you can go and register your trade secret because, once again, in order for it to be a trade secret and to be an asset, it has to remain secret. But there are various mechanisms that you can do this via your employment agreements and or any sort of contract that you have with outside contractors, making sure that you are identifying what is a trade secret. You have to make sure that you have proper security protocols, right? Are you going to keep things in a safe? Are things going to be password protected? You can't just call something a trade secret and have it automatically be one. There are certain steps that you need to take in order for it to be determined as a trade secret. So you may be thinking right now, do I even have any intellectual property? If you have a company, if you are providing a service, if you are offering any sort of good out there in commerce, you own intellectual property. So I wanted to give you sort of brief little couple questions that you should really be asking yourselves, right? Do you have a brand name? If you're selling or offering anything, you 100% have a brand name. Do you have a website? Do you create content either online or in print? Do you post on social media? Do you have top secret information that can give you a competitive edge? Did you create a novel invention? Ask yourself these questions, and these are the questions that I always ask my clients is I need them to take a step back and to start looking at all of the wonderful things that they've created for their company and start to figure out how we can actually protect it using the tools that we spoke about on the last slide. So if you see here, I have a wonderful CBD product by an amazing company named Tonic. Their brand name is Tonic. What is a trade secret is a proprietary blend. So they'll tell you what the ingredients are, but you don't actually know the amounts. That is their trade secret. That is what gives them a competitive edge in the marketplace. If you look at their packaging is subject to copyright protection. If patents would be, if they invented something, right, a certain machine or process in order to distill or process their CBD. But this, I hope, will give you a brief overview of what I mean when I say take inventory of your intellectual property. So now let's say you've started the company, you're taking the process, to establish a brand presence and protect it, and you want to apply for a state cannabis license and you ask, what should I do? The first thing that you're going to need to do is you need to familiarize yourself with the laws and the different licensing options and restrictions, both on the state and municipal level of the state in which you are living. I really can't tell you how many times clients will come to me, prospective clients will come to me, and they'll have no idea. They'll have no idea of the opportunities that are available, the restrictions that are available. I have clients who say, I want to apply for all six types of licenses, here in New Jersey. And that's not even possible, but that's something that they would have known had they just taken some time to read some material. So I get it. I understand. There are certain laws, there are certain statutes, there are certain regulations, and there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages. And they're not particularly written in a way that is easy to understand. But it is important for you to at least go through it as best you can so that you can understand the rules to the game that you are asking to play. It is not a good idea to rely on your lawyers, your consultants, your accountants entirely. We are here to support your efforts. We are not here to push your business forward. That is you. If you are forming the company, if you are going to take on the role of CEO, CIO, COO, you need to understand the company inside and out, and that entails understanding the laws. But once again, your service providers are here to support that efforts, but we're not supposed to actually run the company for you, which some folks do think. So once you familiarize yourself with the laws, look at the types of licenses that are available and the types of restrictions that are available. And then I would highly recommend that if you have not participated in the cannabis industry, but you want a cannabis license, that you speak to operators who are doing what you are doing. Because I understand that it is a very attractive industry. It's a very sexy industry right now that people really want to get into. But regardless, it is still a business, and you still need to have a certain level of business acumen, and you still need to understand that if you're going to go into retail and you want to open up a dispensary, do you have retail experience? Have you sold anything, in your life? Have you opened a brick and mortar store? Have you managed one? Have you worked at one? If not, you may want to bring on folks from other industries who have done that. If you want to grow cannabis and you've been doing it underground in the legacy market, but have you done it, in a sort of regulated legal area such that you can put this on an application? If not, it's unfortunate that right now we don't have areas on the application to put that. But you may want to find somebody who is, who's either a biologist, who's a chemist, who's in agriculture, somebody who can help support the efforts. You may understand the plant itself, but operating in huge greenhouses with the high level of compliance that's required in other states is a completely different ballgame. So you want to make sure that you have a really solid team, which brings me to number 3. And your team doesn't just consist of your owners, but it consists of your staffing, your employees, but also your professional services. And this is where I'm going to say, do your due diligence on everybody. I can't tell you how many company divorces I have seen over my 5-year career. Many of them. It is something that is completely common. It is not unusual by any stretch of the imagination. So you want to make sure that if you're getting into business with folks, that you are asking the proper questions, that you are putting forth the legal documents to make sure you're protecting your interests and the interests, of your business partner. But you also want to make sure that you check under the hood and make sure that everything is good to go there. The reason why I say that is because a lot of times people get into business with their friends. They're very excited. They put things together. They start doing things. And then when money starts rolling in, or when shit hits the fan, all of a sudden now there's issues, but you don't actually have an agreement. So we don't actually know what exactly your rights are and what it is you own. It happens all the time. So please, when you're building out your team, make sure that you are being extremely intentional about it and asking the right questions. The next thing you want to do is you want to craft your story and begin building your brand. Now, if you've been in the cannabis industry, you've been attending events, you've been networking with folks, you probably have a solid idea of what your story entails, what your brand entails. But if not, if you are just starting out and you're trying to figure out, how do I get in there? How do I network? How do I attend these events and make the most out of it? The best thing that you can do is, in a way, create an elevator pitch, right? But the way I'd rather say that is craft your story. We all have these really amazing stories about where we came from, things that we've been through, that you do want to make sure that you can synthesize that into a very digestible piece of information, that when you meet somebody, you can let them know of, this is who I am, this is what I've done, and this is what I want to do. You need to make sure that you hit all 3 of those points, especially when you're networking, when everybody's just trying to get the most out of that time. You want to make sure that you're memorable, and then follow up with folks, as well. Creating a solid business plan, we spoke about this before, it is really important, and it's important that it's done correctly. I know a lot of folks want to DIY their business plans, but if this is your first go around, I do suggest finding folks with experience doing this in the cannabis space. Now, I will say be very careful. There's a lot of folks out there, and I've seen a lot of people lose money over business plans that were not crafted correctly, which is why you need to do your due diligence. Don't just believe them on based on what they say, or because their website is pretty, or because they have 10,000 followers on Instagram. Make sure that you ask for materials. Ask them, let's say, can I look at some of your previous works? Maybe talk to some of the clients that they've serviced before. Make sure that whoever you're going to be working with is legit. The next thing you're going to want to do is, if you're in a state that either about to legalize, has legalized, more times rather than none, the municipalities have an enormous amount of discretion. So you're going to need to get involved in that municipal process. So if you don't know who your councilmen are, you don't know who your municipal officials are, it's about time that you start to get familiar with them. And I will say, and I will admit that prior to getting into the cannabis industry, I couldn't really tell you who my councilman was. I couldn't tell you what a city council did, or what a planning board did, or what a zoning board did. I have no idea. It wasn't something that was really on my radar. But this is something that is going to be on your radar. So make sure that you identify the municipalities, familiarize yourself with ordinances, learn how to read these ordinances, attend these city town meetings. If you are in a town where they're looking to ban cannabis, that's when you want to get involved, and you want to sort of be that cannabis expert in a way to them, to be able to help them out with their decision making, because we still have a lot of reefer madness folks out there who are looking at this industry very skeptically, because they just don't have the information or the education that you may have or that you're getting right now. So definitely get involved in that. Then forming your company, preparing the pertinent business documents, and then a lot of times there are states, where they are going to require that you apply for a minority, women, disabled veteran, and other certifications, because sometimes what they'll do is they'll give these businesses that are certified as such a certain level of priority, or there's a certain amount of licenses that are specifically allocated either in the statute or regulations for these businesses that are certified as such. So definitely look into that, and sometimes they can take a couple of weeks. So if you're in a state with an impending deadline, you want to make sure that you get on that as soon as possible. And this is what I've been talking about in the last one. This is what I share, with our clients for a pre-application checklist. These are sort of the 4 buckets that you are going to be looking at when it comes to trying to apply for a cannabis license, right? So you're going to need funding. I am not going to sugarcoat this. This is a very, very expensive industry to get into, especially on the East Coast, and especially in states that are looking to just start out with different cannabis businesses, and who don't really have what a mature cannabis market. It might be very expensive to get into it. So you're going to need seed funding, which is funding for you to start up and get up and running, right? And that's going to encompass application fees. It's going to encompass municipal fees, and any other fees really that they're requiring. So this is where your business plan, your pitch deck, your executive summary is going to come into play if you do have to go out there and start to, get investors to invest in your business. But even friends and family, you should be able to show your friends and family your vision for your company and be able to synthesize it in a way that they can understand it, so that they can also feel comfortable investing in your business. Within that, you'll have your budget, your revenue projections, and your financing strategy as well. And this is either where your accountant may come in, or if you're working with a consultant, this is where they may come in, because you might be saying, well, how can I project something in a state where this hasn't really just happened yet? Well, we look at comparable markets, and we really try to make our best guesses as to how this is going to play out. Nothing is going to be set in stone, but at least it will give you a path that where you need to walk down to. The next is your location. There are a lot of times in various states, you are required to have property before you can apply for certain licenses. So you need to make sure that you're going to have that municipal approval. You're going to make sure that you have to have a community impact plan, as we've seen, required. And also do your due diligence on the property. Make sure that it's properly zoned for what you want to do. I know sometimes we have clients who say, I really found a property, I fell in love with it, but then we look it up and it's not properly zoned for it. If it's not in an area specifically for manufacturing or cultivation, but it's good for retail, then that's what it's zoned for, retail. It's not zoned for really any manufacturing. If it's a residential area, is it zoned for retail? We don't know. That's going to depend on your town. So you need to make sure that You need to understand what type of construction is going to need to be created on that property as well, because of the high level of security that all cannabis operations require. Are you going to lease it? Are you going to own it? If you want to buy it, look at the mortgage, right? Or if you're going to lease it, you're going to have to look at the mortgage to make sure that there are no limitations on this more on the whoever owns the property to lease it out, making sure that in that mortgage agreement it doesn't say that they can't lease the property out to any sort of illegal business or federally legal business. There's various language that can come into play. You want to make sure that you look at that document and make sure that that's all squared away. Now, in your team, you want to make sure that you have skills transferable to what you want to do, right? So once again, you want to go into retail. You want to have somebody on the team that has retail experience, right? Somebody that has a customer experience as well, a general manager, anything like that. You want to make sure that they're coming for you, regardless of the industry. You want to make sure that you actually have folks who are going to be able to get the business up and running. Because the hard part is not getting the license, which is also very difficult. But the hard part is actually once you get the license and you have to build this out and you have to get your team together and you actually have to start operations. Some states may require residency requirements. They may require that one or a certain percentage of your team be actually from that state. So you want to take a look at that. Your professional services, contractors, employees as well. You want to make sure that you have all of this and that you have folks that you can trust, but also that you like working with and you like generally as humans, because they are going to play a very, very pivotal role in your journey, and you want to make sure that you're comfortable with them. So ask the questions that you need to ask to properly vet all of them out. Take a look to see, once again, if any of the certifications for minority, women, disabled, veteran, social equity applicant status as well. Once again, this is all going to be very specific to the state or the municipality that you're in, but these are just a few things that you can think about for your team. And we talked about intellectual property, as well, but it's making sure that if you are creating all these wonderful assets and you are owning all this IP, that it is properly protected, and that when you're entering into business with folks, that it is protected from somebody using it, from somebody taking it, from somebody misappropriating it as well. So we want to make sure that all of those protections are in place. So we've gone through provided a lot of information, but here are really my final thoughts as a lawyer, as an advocate, as somebody who has owned her own business. Do your due diligence on your potential team members and service providers. I truly cannot stress this enough. Now, I am the believer that everything is a learning experience. So whether it goes good or bad, it'll still be a learning experience. But the cannabis industry is an expensive industry. So you don't want to really be making more expensive mistakes than you have to. So take it from me, ask the questions, ask to see what work product they've done before, ask people in the cannabis industry if they've worked with them before. Just ask, don't really take anybody's word for what they've done, because there are a lot of sharks out there and a lot of people who are really just not doing some great work. Not all money is good money. I have seen a lot of investment documents come across my desk where there are investors or investors group asking for a huge percentage, of your company for an amount of capital, and then there's all these restrictions, and a lot of time they tend to be quite predatory. So you have to make sure that you really analyze that you are walking through this with your attorney and with your accountant to make sure that this money is actually good money, and that these investors who are going to be investing in your business are people that you really want to work with, because it is hard. Company divorces are hard, both with owners and investors. So you really want to make sure that the folks that you are getting into business with are people that you do like. Get a good accountant. I really can't stress enough, but somebody who has experience with cannabis, because of the tax code 280E that doesn't allow cannabis businesses to deduct certain business expenses that normal industries can. So you want to make sure that they are aware of that. I know I've seen some financial plans where 280E wasn't in there at all, which makes me think this accountant didn't even realize that there is this tax code out there. So you want to make sure that they have experience in that. Consult competent counsel before entering into contracts, and do not sign as an individual, as we spoke about before. I would really, really advise anybody entering into contracts for anything that you please review it beforehand. I've had certain people give away a lot of their intellectual property. I've had a lot of folks give away more equity in their company than they should have. And I've seen it, but it's too late at that point because they've already signed a contract. So please make sure that you consult with competent counsel before that. And also begin working on your application as soon as possible. If you are in a state that's not yet legalized or is about to, look at other comparable states as to what these applications have asked prior to, right? So on the East Coast with Jersey, we were looking at Jersey's past rounds, we were looking at Massachusetts, we were looking at Illinois. So making sure that you're looking to see at these other states, what did they require? Because more or less they're going to require the same. We see a lot of recycling of legislation and regulation and application requirements. So even if you're in a state where this hasn't happened just yet, no reason to sort of sit back and wait for that to happen. You can really already start now and looking to see what they're going to require and start taking the appropriate steps. Network your ass off. This is exactly what I did when I started in the cannabis industry. So I can only really speak from my experience, but from my experience coming in through the ancillary end, networking is what really, really helped a lot of my successes in this space. So I would really tell you that this isn't an industry where you can hide under a rock and hope that somebody finds you. This is an industry where you have to be at the front lines. You have to put yourself out there. So network as much as you can, both through online. Use the power of the social media. Go to networking events. If you can, if it's if hopefully it's not too cost prohibitive, but also time prohibitive. But it's also an investment in yourself, and I would really encourage you to do so. Keep all receipts, all documentation, registrations, contracts, everything. Keep receipts about everything because you never know when you're going to need them. Put it in writing. Put everything in writing. This as a lawyer is, probably lawyering 101. Is it in writing? Yes. If it's not, well, it's going to be very hard to prove. So get things in writing. Documents purchased from LegalZoom or Rocket Lawyer. They, for certain documents, maybe like an NDA or something like that, non-disclosure agreement, they are okay. It should never be your final product. And I'm going to say that again, it should never be your final product. So please get competent counsel before using these documents to make very, large business decisions. Get an ironclad NDA as well, so that when you're talking to investors or you're talking to potential team members and you're divulging a lot of the information because you're excited and you want to get folks on board, you need to make sure that you're protecting that information through a non-disclosure agreement. And more times than not, folks are willing to enter into these NDAs because they want to talk to you. If not, then that may not be somebody that you actually want to speak to. So you have to sort of take the temperature of that relationship. But for the most part, we would recommend, if you're divulging anything proprietary, to please get an NDA before you actually divulge it. Because once it's out there, it can't be taken back. And ideas are not protectable. So if I can leave you with anything, it's that. Ideas are not protectable. It is the manifestation of that idea that is protectable. Don't sit, speaking of manifestations, don't sit on your intellectual property rights either, enforce them. So if you have taken the steps to get trademark protection, copyright protection, your responsibilities as a trademark or copyright or patent owner doesn't stop when you actually get the registration. You have to continue to enforce your rights. So if you see somebody using your trademark or using your design or using, your invention or something like that, you want to make sure that you are enforcing your rights because that's how you keep them. And lastly, consult with a competent attorney familiar with the cannabis industry. There are so many nuances to this industry that if you're not consulting with one that's aware of it, you're really just doing yourself a disservice. And there's really a lot of fabulous cannabis attorneys out there who have been doing this, for quite some time. You can check out even the International Cannabis Bar Association if you're looking for one. But I would recommend that if you're going to start applying for licenses, entering into cannabis deals, that your attorney understand the landscape so that they can help you navigate through it. So that's all that I have for today. And so I'm definitely welcome any questions, that you may have, but thank you so much. And feel free to follow me on Instagram. It's where I post a lot of my information, my events, updates, all of that stuff. And if anybody's looking for consultation or wants legal support, that is my email. And I look forward to hearing from everybody.